welcome to our webinar. My name is William Hanson, and also with us on this webinar is
Jean-Paul Wijers and
Dr. Arne Hulleman, and both of you are in the Netherlands. I'm in London, and my job is as an etiquette coach, and I'm also executive director of the English Manor. Jean-Paul here and Dr. Arne work for Protocolbureau, which is Europe's leading expert in protocol. Jean-Paul, you are the founder of Protocolbureau, which started when you were a student at Hotel School The Hague. And in your last year at the hotel school, you worked at the Franklin D. Roosevelt for Freedoms Awards. And in that year, it was given to His Majesty the King of Spain to prepare for their first event. The Master of Ceremonies to Her Majesty Queen Beatrix gave Jean-Paul's group a lecture about protocol, and that is how it all started. And 25 years later, Protocolbureau is proud to be Europe's leading protocol expert, specializing in networking events and trainings about how to manage relationships. And Jean-Paul is the author of Managing Authentic Relationships, and together with Dr. Arne, who's with us, currently manages Protocolbureau.
Thank you very much. And William is the owner and executive director of the English Manor, which was founded in 2001 by a former member of the royal household of Her Majesty the Queen. And the English Manor is UK's leading etiquette institute. William is author, broadcaster and podcaster, and the only etiquette expert to hold 2 Guinness World Records. True?
True, yes. Absolutely. Thank you very much. For the next 30, well, we're here with you for 45 minutes, but for the first 30 minutes, I'm going to ask Jean-Paul some questions and vice versa. If you have any questions yourselves, please use the question and answer box, the Q&A box. It should be at the bottom of your screen. If you click that button, it will toggle the Q&A window for you, and Dr. Arne will moderate those questions for us. But we'll first start with a poll, which hopefully will appear on your screen very shortly. And we will ask you to vote in that poll. Since the outbreak of the coronavirus,
Since the outbreak of the corona crisis, how much time did you spend on managing relationships? Can you give us a percentage of your work spent on this? Thank you very much. William, are you still there?
I'm here.
Great.
There's a gremlin on the line.
Yeah.
So if those can see the poll now, if you would like to vote in it. Hopefully it has all popped up on everybody's screen.
All right. In the meanwhile, shall we move on to our presentation, and we come back to the poll at a later moment in the presentation?
Yes, you can. We'll keep that poll up, and you can vote on it throughout the course of this webinar. Jean-Paul, can I start by asking you some questions?
Yes, please.
So you, obviously, as I mentioned in the introduction, you're the author of your first book, Managing Authentic Relationships, and director of Protocol. Can you just, for the benefit of people that may just have joined, can you just talk about how that works and the connection between the two?
Thank you. I think that's a very good question, because for me, it's a very logical combination, but not for everyone. I think most people associate protocol with royalty, but the official definition of protocol is how to arrange meetings with important stakeholders. And of course, within royal households, this is mainly with other royals or heads of states. But in the basis, organizing meetings with important stakeholders is a method that can be used by a much broader range of organizations than just monarchies. So to put it in other words, I think protocol, or at least that's how we see it, protocol is the implementation of your networking strategy. Or no successful relationship management is possible without the tool of protocol.
Do you think protocol has had a bad reputation?
Well, I think it does, yes. Protocol is seen very often as unnecessary formalities, and that is indeed a part of protocol. But I think in an era where things move very quickly and we spend very little time talking to each other, building real relationships of trust, protocol is a way to make sure that we build in time to spend, we build in some time to actually do this. So in this way, protocol, another explanation of protocol is staged personal attention. And I think in our era, there's a big lack of personal attention.
Mm.
So yes.
Yes, the impersonal has risen up and the personal has been suppressed in certain environments.
Well, that's one of the advantages of Corona, I think. We all, most of us are sitting at home. We all have so much more time than we used to have. And I think Corona crisis is a really good moment to strengthen relationships. This is the moment not to do sales or to push your products, but it is a perfect moment to get into contact with the people you already know and ask them, how are you doing? Are you in good health? How's the organization doing? To show empathy, to show that you understand the situation, and to share the feeling about the crisis we are both in. So from a protocol perspective, this might be a terrible situation, but it is an opportunity to really build on strengthening your network, the relationship with the people who are important to you.
And what would you say the most effective way at the moment in the Corona age to strengthen those relationships is video calls like this, is telephone calls, is sending a letter, or a combination of all three?
I think that the main thing is that it should be as personal as possible. So my bank sends me an invitation regularly for events. Now, not during the Corona, but before the Corona, of course. And most of those invitations started with dear clients on top of it. I think those kind of things really work very badly at this moment. So it should be personal. So if it's something you send through the mail, it needs to be personal and not mass mail. So personal attention is really something that people value very much, especially now.
I've noticed with your dear client example is very timely. The English Manor, as you do, we have a newsletter that goes out to people sort of every couple of weeks. And the technology is there that if the people that have signed up for your newsletter, or even the customers of the bank or the law firm, whatever it happens to be, you have their first and last name, and you can set your newsletters to say, Dear Jean-Paul, if they have given you that information in the instance of a newsletter. With a bank, of course, you've given them that information. You've got to give them that information, so there is no excuse. So I feel that there is it's so easy for these banks and companies in order to personalize their communications, even though it is just an autofill function, but still so many banks and organizations forget that people do business with people.
Right.
How about new relationships, Jean-Paul?
Well, I think that's where it gets really difficult at the moment. So it's been proven that building a relationship, a strong relationship built on trust through the internet, through the digital world, is possible, but it takes much, much more time before strong relationships are built. So yes, when it comes to building relationships, the internet is a substitute. But we humans, we are made to physically see each other. And when we see each other physically, we can actually, read each other. We can feel certain things. So that's where it goes much quicker. However, there are many examples of where people were able to build a relationship of strong relationships of trust through the internet. But it does take a lot longer, yes. Now, I think we are at the moment in a crisis. So if you are planning to build new relationships with from a commercial perspective, for example, that would be maybe even damaging to your relationship. So at the moment, it's really, I don't know about everyone who's listening right now, but what normally we're called, let's say every day, by people trying to sell us things. And now at the moment, no one is calling us anymore. And that's because I think this is not the moment to sell your product. And we're all trying, we're living from day to day, day by day. And this is not the moment to look ahead much further than a month or 2 months. So that makes it quite different. Yes.
Yes, it does. And Alma, if you were having to revise your book, which only came out last year, if you were having to revise your book today to take into account what we have learned in the last 6 weeks about coronavirus, would there be much that you would change or adapt in your book?
I think, well, there's of course, I think the world has changed a lot. And I think digital has become like electricity. So that's the new normal. But the other end, the opposite is also true. I think personal encounters have become like Louis Vuitton. Very special, very unique, but we can't do without it. But if we're going to use the personal encounter as a tool to achieve our goals, then we are aware that these are very exceptional moments, so very unique moments, very, very costly and very efficiently used if we need to use it. So I think there was a trend that was already there, and especially in protocol, the basis of protocol is to think who are the most important people for your organization. That's the people you give your personal attention to, because you can't give everyone your personal attention. But for the rest of the world, this will move towards the same direction as well, I think. Yeah.
Mm. So, okay, forgetting the corona situation, what exactly is your book about?
The book is about building a professional relationship management for the entire organization. And my background is protocol, so that's the more operational part of a relationship building, the networking event. But with with 3 other experts, we describe in the book how to actually implement professional relationship management on a strategic, managerial, and operational level. And the book is mainly about how to implement relationship management, but we spend a great deal in explaining what relationships are all about. I think really important if you work in relationship management, if you're responsible for the management of a network of an organization, you need to know the fundamentals of how relationships work. Mm. For example, I get the question very often, what's the difference between sales, marketing, and networking? And there's a big difference where networking is very honest about, this is my product, would you like to buy it? Marketing is more about brand awareness, perhaps. I think building relationships is not about selling your product at all. So in relationship management, for example, when you build relationships, the goal of the other is as important as your own goal. They need to be equally important. Building relationships often means that you have to give a lot without knowing when you get something in return. So in the beginning, it's a lot of giving, and you're not even sure when and if you get something in return. However, I must say research has shown that if you're able to build a strong relationship, then you will always get something in return. Now, in the book, we describe an example of a conference venue. And they asked me that question. So what does relationship management add to what we already do in sales and marketing? And then I asked them the question, what's your most successful conference? And they said, it's a conference about water management. And I said, why is it so successful? And they said, well, that's Pete who's responsible for that conference. And I said, so what about Pete? And they said, well, Pete knows everyone. And then they explained to me that Pete is one of the members of the network about water management. Pete isn't seen as a vendor of conference locations. Pete is one of them. And being one of them means that you get all the benefits from the network everyone else gets.
Mm.
No one ever thought of organizing the conference at any other location than at that location. So, but by achieving this, by becoming a member of the network, you're not saying, I have a location, would you like to rent it? You're actually fighting for the goal of the network, which is, in this case, water management. Okay.
So can you explain a little bit about the current nature of relationships, not in a romantic way, in a professional way?
Yeah, maybe I would like to show a video of a film that we always also show during our postgraduate program, The Devil Wears Prada. I'm not quite sure if this video is going to be streaming perfectly for everyone who's actually listening right now, but I think the video very well shows what building relationships is all about. So, Bengt Arne, can you please start the video?
Do we need sound?
I think there's no sound now.
Well, should we explain what's in the clip? I know it very well because I like the film and I've seen it before in the trainings.
Yes, you know which part I'm showing.
Yes, it's where I forget the characters' names, but one of the Emily Blunt character is giving, who of course later went on to play Mary Poppins, is going and giving Meryl Streep's character the names and a bit of information about the people that are about to present themselves to Miranda Priestley, I think that's her character's name, to Meryl Streep's character, so that Meryl is able to have a more personal interaction with them and appears that she knows exactly who they are and who their wife, girlfriend, partner, etc. is.
Yeah, I think it's a very luxurious form of protocol, but it's so important that the Meryl Streep, she plays the chief editor of a fashion magazine, and the fashion magazine has hosts a reception at the Paris Fashion Week, and they think it's really important that Meryl Streep knows everyone by name. So she has two assistants behind her, whisper all the names, and we actually see it unfold. It doesn't go 100% flawlessly, but the reason I'm always showing this video, because it shows you the difficulty in building relationships. So at some point in the video, she asks a guy my note, and that's where you get to the essence of building relationships, because asking, did you get my note, is asking is all about your own goal. And building relationships should be about both goals. So the guy reacts a bit irritated and says, and she quickly replies, no business tonight. So if you've done a lot of networking, you know this. At networking events, you're not supposed to talk about business. But on the other hand, we're all there for business reasons. We've all been invited because we are who we are in our professional lives. So this is what we call the big paradox in building relationships. The title of our book even refers to it. Managing authentic relationships is factually impossible, because relationships are best built in the absence of a goal and a time schedule. However, relationship management basically is two things, namely developing goals and setting a time schedule. So this is where it gets really difficult, and this is where you fundamentally have to understand how that works in order to be successful in building relationships. I think this more or less ends my part. Before I'd like to ask you some questions. Bengt Arne, did you do you have any questions we could answer now?
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Jean-Paul. We have one question received, and I'd like to ask that question maybe or direct it to William. What role can LinkedIn messaging play in times of Corona for building new professional relationships? And in what way can you write a personal LinkedIn message to someone you do not know personally?
Good question. I think forget the Corona bit for a minute. We'll add that section in now, but in terms of when you are connecting with anybody on LinkedIn, forgetting, as I say, Corona, you always need to ask yourself, why are you connecting with them? If you have not met them in person, if you have not done business or are in the process of doing business, just adding someone for the sake of adding someone to have them on your LinkedIn, almost like, like a child would collect shiny objects or the latest toys. Oh, they're a good contact to have in my network. That is not an authentic relationship. Your motivations for adding them are for all the wrong reasons. And so if you are going to connect with someone that you haven't yet met, but perhaps would like to meet, you absolutely have to delete the standard message that you get on LinkedIn and tailor it to that specific person. And it's, in this day and age, not just putting, let's say I'd never met Jean-Paul. Let's say I wouldn't just write, "Dear Jean-Paul, I hope you're keeping well in this weird time. It would be good to connect." That's fine. It's better than the standard message. But again, Jean-Paul might look at that and think, well, but why? I just don't, I'm never going to do, I don't think I'm ever going to do business or come into the orbit of William or the English Manor or whatever it happens to be. You have to use what you can find on their LinkedIn profile to tailor something about them. So if you've noticed they've gone to a particular university, for example, or they've worked at a particular company, or they have a connection in common, you could refer to that in your message when you reach out to them, but still ask yourself, what is the reason for connecting with them? If it's just to sort of say they look lovely on your contacts book, or you need to boost how many people you're connected with on LinkedIn, they are not legitimate reasons.
So again, the more personal, the better, is your conclusion.
Yeah. Exactly. And someone's just said that they think my Instagram is incredible. So that's very kind of them on the chat function. Very kind.
Any more questions, Bengt-Arne? We should answer now.
For the time being, there's no other questions. I do remind that we still have a poll in progress. And for those who haven't responded yet to the question, since the outbreak of Corona, how much time did you spend on managing relationships? And can you give us a percentage of your work spent on this? We'll keep it open for a couple more minutes and then we'll share the results.
I've just seen on the question and answer, if I may jump in, there's been a follow-up question to that LinkedIn one, and someone's said, should you ask yourself why the person would want to connect to you? Yes, I suppose in many ways you could. But again, if you can't answer that, or the question phrased the other way, don't add them. I'm sure we've all seen people on LinkedIn who we think, oh gosh, I've heard of them, or they're terribly important. But if you're not, if your circle, if it's like a Venn diagram, if your circles, your two respective circles don't overlap, don't add them until your circles have overlapped and they will be aware of who you are and they're aware that you are aware of them.
Now, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, William, is the technology in general. So not just LinkedIn. Is it helpful in building relationships or not? So what's your view on that?
Yes, it can be. I mean, look, there we go. Case in point. Simone has just said on the chat function that she's aware of my Instagram. In fact, you and I, Jean-Paul, met however many years ago via Twitter. You read my tweets, you liked them, you reached out to me, and here we are doing this, as well as all the other work that we have done together over the years. So technology can be incredibly useful. And we couldn't talk to you today without technology. But I think, sadly, what has perhaps happened, especially in very big corporates and big government, is that technology has almost replaced the need for what is considered old-fashioned, tedious in some people's eyes, networking. And technology should be there to complement and to make things easier. But exactly your point about, dear client, bank starting dear client, or dear William Hanson, when it should really be dear Mr. Hanson, or dear William, not dear William Hanson. No one's name is ever formatted like that, or should be, and that's me with my etiquette hat on. But they're using that, and you can see that clearly it's being auto-generated by a computer, and there is no personalization there, and it doesn't make me feel overly appreciated by the bank that I give my business to. And so I think, technology is good, but it's not everything.
Now, so you need to know how to use it. So let's zoom in on that a little bit. For example, email. Do you see a lot of people making mistakes in emails?
Lots of mistakes. They either become far too familiar too quickly, and they almost try and force a familial, colloquial relationship with someone. So they automatically assume. I get people that email me going, "Hey, Will," they've never met me. And actually that's going to irritate me. However, I appreciate that there are people in life that if you messaged and said, "Dear Mr. Smith," they might think, "Oh, this person's a bit formal. This person's too stuck up. I don't like them." So I appreciate that goes both ways. And there are all sorts of different clues and tricks that you can look for as to know how to approach that person and what approach they probably like, which we would focus on in a training. But I think that the biggest mistake, and I don't know, you're probably not in Holland, you can tell me if I'm right here, Jean-Paul, and everyone that's participating on this, is that you find the Brits in particular, and some other European nations, are far too apologetic on email. And they'll say, "Dear Jean-Paul, so sorry to email you out of the blue," or "sorry to take up your day." And automatically they've started their email with an apology. And I may not have noticed that, or might not have thought that they're interrupting my day, or I'm not sorry, so why should they be sorry? But it's the first thing that they have said. Or "I am just emailing you about." Well, you're not just emailing me about anything. You are emailing me about it. And there's almost this sort of over-politeness. And I know that seems odd coming from someone who runs an etiquette school, but sometimes you can be too polite. And actually a more efficient but polite way of communication is what we try to teach and advocate.
And we've worked together for quite some time. You've been in the Netherlands very often, so you're very familiar with our culture. I think the majority of the people attending our session today are Dutch. I don't think the Dutch are similar to what you just described. We are perhaps on the other side of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
True? Is that your...
And something that you said to me, I think only last year, which stuck with me, but because obviously we are all prisoners of our own geography in many ways, and because you live at sea level or below sea level, you, as a nation, you've got to be terribly efficient. If something suddenly happens, you have to get on and deal with it as a survival instinct. Whereas in Britain, if we don't live, although we are an island, most of us are above sea level or not at necessarily as risk of flooding or anything like that. And so, and our weather is pretty fine. I mean, it's not great, but it's fine. Doesn't do anything that exciting. And so we're almost conditioned to our climate. And I think the other issue, the biggest issue, going back to what you said to me earlier, the biggest mistake I think people make is that they are unaware of other time zones. We all do business now. I think it's very rare that any company doesn't do business with someone in another country, even if they don't do it regularly. And people are unaware necessarily, even within their own time zone, of people's time. And maybe this is going to change after Corona because we're all working slightly different patterns because now we work from home. But I don't mind if people want to email me at 6 a.m. in the morning because I'm generally at my desk. But I am aware that there are other people that I do business with that if I emailed them at 6 o'clock in the morning, they'd be really irritated because they would feel that they had to respond to that email, or they think, does William really want me to respond at 6 a.m.? But there is technology now available. Gmail has it built in. There are apps that you can get where if you are aware of somebody's time zone or their working patterns, you can schedule that email. You can write it at 4 a.m. in the morning, but you can schedule that email to go out later on in the day at a more respectful time. And your email is going to be treated a lot better, I would argue, if you have respected the recipient's time and paid them that courtesy. And so this technology, as I say, it's very helpful, but you've got to be able to use it and know how to use it to the benefit of your career and everybody else's life.
About different cultures. Can you give us any information about how to handle different cultures? Because on the internet, we're one big world, so we are dealing with all these different cultures. So is there a way to do this in a smart manner?
Some of it is going to be trial and error and finding out what gets the best response. Others is being super critical. And I think a lot of the other sort of slight disparity between what we have now and is that everybody's time is pre-corona was incredibly precious, and we were all rushed and we were all busy. But yet we have had the greatest quantity of time-saving, labor-saving technology and devices in our lives, whether that's domestically or professionally. We've got all of these things to make things so efficient. And yes, it has sped things up, but it sped things up and we filled it with everything else. And I think sometimes people rush too much to do things and don't necessarily take the time to critically look at how they are writing. I don't know whether everybody else can see this, but on our chat function, someone has just said, clearly a Brit, has just looked back at an email that they were drafting before this webinar, and it did start, "I am just writing to update you." And now they've changed it. And I think unless people are, adults are particularly bad at this, I think, when they get out of the educational sphere. And sometimes we have, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, but we have found this with our own courses that we have run, whether it's my personal courses or your courses or joint courses, that adults who have been years and years ago went to university and they're sort of out of that learning environment sometimes take a little bit longer to readjusting to the fact that things that they might have been doing for the last 10 years maybe weren't as optimal as they could be. And actually they sort of take a day or two to get back into the, okay, I'm learning now. Whereas a child, for example, is conditioned to learn, and so is a lot easier to teach.
Yes. Any questions we haven't answered yet? You're following the chat, William. The English manner. Sorry, yeah, Ben Garner's there.
Yeah, indeed. We do have several questions. We have a participant living in Greece stating that there's a difference in Northern European and Southern European way of building relationships, stating that there are more face-to-face meetings and how and building trust is applied when we meet people in person. So how can we deal with this now in Corona?
Who would you like to answer that?
William, maybe you can share your views.
Yeah, to be perfectly honest with that, it's tough. We are facing something globally that none of us were ready to, from a country point of view, were ready to face it. None of us were prepared. And to be perfectly honest, although what has happened in the past in Greece, as you say, that a lot of trust is built face to face, it can't happen. It can't happen at the moment. And we don't know when it's going to go back to normal. So I think generally the most effective organizations and countries in general, we can either spend 4 months going, oh, it's not like it used to be, and panicking, or we can try and find a way to go, yeah, it's a bit rubbish, but actually let's try and find a new way of doing things. And I think people need to be a lot more tolerant across the board of any mistakes that potentially might be made, because most of the motivations, the motivation is from a good place. It's people mean well. They might get things wrong, but it's fine because suddenly we're having to learn. And globally, we are all in the same boat. And so I think the best countries and businesses are going to be the ones that go, okay, let's just rip up the rule book and start again and find new ways to connect, rather than trying to think, well, we've never done that before. Well, yeah, but we've never had some in our lifetimes, we've never had something like this.
So that's something that applies to our profession as well, protocol and etiquette.
Yeah,
very much so. We have a lot of discussion about this specifically, of course. Protocol is not very well known for its innovative strength. What's really in protocol is that you apply the rules of protocol in the same manner every time, over and over again. And that's all done in the same way to manage expectations and thereby build relationships. So that's why I think a lot of protocol experts find it very difficult to go along with the new era, with the new time. But I do agree. I mean, the world is changing so rapidly and so drastically that we do have to change and go along. I think 10 years ago, if we would have had a conversation online, we would have all three of us be wearing a suit with tie probably. But I think not very long ago, William, you made a brilliant video about video conference etiquette. So what's really important when you make when you have a conference like this? But can you briefly explain us what the main tips were you gave in the video?
Yeah, it's on YouTube for those that want to watch the full thing after this. But it's the shot is the key thing. Having the camera, the actual webcam, which I'm pointing at now, actually in line with your eyes, where optimal, rather than to point it up like this, which is never good, or where we just get your forehead lighting as well. Zoom, actually, as we know, doesn't have a paid account, sadly, but has a function where you can make your face look even prettier, and it will sort of make things look slightly nicer. But I think what we are all learning very quickly over the last 6 weeks as a world is that everybody looks awful on video conference. They don't look as good as they do in the flesh. And I think we can be more forgiving. And again, it's finding the funny side of it if needs be. We're all in the same boat. There should be a greater tolerance if things are suboptimal.
All right, Bengt-Arne, any more questions?
Yes, indeed. I do have a question maybe for Jean-Paul to answer, which is when or how often should you communicate to a new group of contacts if they haven't replied to a first message, even after having personalized that first approach?
Thank you very much. I think that's a very difficult answer to question. So there's no uniform answer to this question. When building a new relationship, it's all about what do you think? How do you feel the relationship is? You need to approach this. It needs to be a tailor-made approach, especially when dealing with new clients. And the more personal the contact with the new client is, the more able you're actually, the more you are able to read the client and to read between the lines, because you need the details between the lines to know the answer to this question. So therefore, instead of emailing, it would be better to pick up the phone now during the Corona crisis and to give them a call, because calling someone or meeting someone through Zoom is already easier to pick up those small details than just an email contact. Especially in the beginning, you need to be able to fully read, or as much as possible read the other, to find out how to handle the situation.
I agree.
Thanks, and I think that that also aligns a little bit with another question that we received. Is as all relationship events have been cancelled up to the autumn, are there other ways for boards or directors to keep in touch with their relationship in a good way? And what tips do you have for this? So you mentioned already briefly, pick up the phone, call them. But are there any other tips, Jean-Paul?
I think there are two things really important. You should stay in contact, whatever way you're going to do it, but remain in contact with, not too much, not too little, but don't make sure it's not you're not doing anything. So you need to keep the communication lines open. Then secondly, it should be, as I already said, as personal as possible. And thirdly, especially now we're still locked up, this is not the moment to sell yourself. This is the moment that the only real answers you can actually ask someone is, how are you doing? Are you in good health? How's the organization doing? So this is what for the moment I think what to do.
Thanks, Jean-Paul. Maybe, if I may, another question to William. You gave us a few tips about the online webinars and the etiquette around it. But which platforms do you have any ideas which are the best to use for these? Definitely for larger meetings, for more than 20 participants, for example, because it becomes rather difficult.
It does, and I'll be honest, Zoom is fine, but I think there are a lot better technologies out there. Zoom is getting an awful lot of publicity at the moment, including yesterday on our television screens. There was a charity fundraiser television program for our health service, and there was a clip of Prince William that did a little comedy skit. To be honest, it was not very funny, but within that, he mentioned Zoom. So we now even have the royal family mentioning one particular product, which would never have happened 6 weeks ago. So whilst Zoom might be fine and might be very popular, I think it's worth doing some investigative work into other ones. Livestorm is particularly good. I like that one. Google Hangouts isn't bad. Skype is fine for a couple of people. I think Skype doesn't have as professional a connotation as Zoom and Google Hangouts. But if it's for close colleagues, that's fine. Obviously, Microsoft Teams, I've only used a couple of times. It seems all right. So there are better ways to do it. Now, a WhatsApp call, for example, still within, and it'll be interesting to see if Corona changes this, but within Britain, WhatsApp is purely social, really, or incredibly close colleagues. You would never reach out to somebody, whether it's a new client or a new contact, via WhatsApp. But then there are cultures, particularly the other side of the world to us, where WhatsApp is both social and professional. And I've had approaches from people I've never met who've suddenly got my WhatsApp and have just messaged me out of the blue. And from a British point of view, I'm slightly affronted by that initially. But then that's their way of doing business. So it's, who am I to say that's right or right? It's wrong from my culture's point of view, but it's right from theirs. So it's not wrong or right. So I think you need to, again, think about what culture or what are the capabilities of the people that you are doing business with.
Thank you, William. And as we are approaching the end of this session, let me close the poll and share the results with you. And maybe Jean-Paul, you can give your views on the outcomes of the poll. I'm sharing the results as we speak, and we see that 50% of the responses says that they're spending 35 to 70% of their time during Corona now on managing relationships. Some views, Jean-Paul.
Let me put on my microphone again. No, I think that's that's very good to hear, first of all, and not surprisingly, we get a lot of questions about how to maintain relationships with the people that are important to us, to our organization, how to build new relationships, etc. So this has been a hot topic in the last weeks, ever since the outbreak of the Corona crisis. So I can imagine that a lot of people are spending their time in maintaining or building relationships. So.
Yes.
So that's good to hear. Then another question that we received, Jean-Paul, for the during the video of The Devil Wears Prada, after that she said, well, we shouldn't talk about work during a network event. But how about now in the digital age, when you're online networking? Is there any specific rules when you're networking via email or online meetings?
I think this is also a very good question for William, but I think online is very different from offline. So at a networking reception, like in the movie The Devil Wears Prada, it's absolutely not done to do any business. Most Zoom meetings are meetings, well, actually factual meetings. So they have a certain topic. So that's where already business topics are going to be discussed. So it's much easier to just do business. But that's one of the reasons I said it's really difficult to build a relationship because the topic is the main reason for the call, and the building of the relationship is probably not the main reason people meet each other on Zoom. But what's your opinion, William?
I think when you are reaching out to people digitally, whether it's via Zoom or whether it's just by email or LinkedIn, I think a lot of people, and this happens for in-person networking events as well, get caught up in their own jargon and their own corporate speak. And they will basically announce what they, even when they're meeting people within their organization, and they might say, yes, I'm a quantitative analyst attached to the finance department. Well, what the hell's that? I don't know what a quantitative analyst is attached to the finance department. I might even work for that company. Whereas actually, if you explain your job in more basic terms, such as I help the finance department build software that helps grow, helps us understand client trends. Now, whether I'm in or outside of your organization, I'm going to understand better what you do and what your function is. Rather than reading what's on your business card or what's on your contract, try to explain your job. Etiquette coach is a prime example. I meet so many people who have absolutely no idea what I do as a job, even if they've heard of etiquette. So instead of saying etiquette coach, I say I give people social and professional confidence by teaching them the rules of etiquette. And it sort of, not only does it market myself in a better way, but it explains to them in a, I think, not particularly patronizing way what I do. And it shows the value of my job and how I could help them. So I think when you do reach out to people digitally or in person, just try to think, hang on, take the corporate jargon out of this. Let's write it in plain, simple English that anybody from any walk of life can understand.
Thank you very much. And as we are now really approaching the end, finalizing some final thoughts as a wrap up before we close the session. William?
I would say, I think the companies and the organizations and the business people that will come out of this awful time that we are really in are those that are, I think Corona is going to have forced a lot of businesses in order to adapt, in order to survive. And the ones that won't survive are the ones who spent however many weeks this is going to be going, well, we can't do anything because of this. And actually, because of the technology that we have in our lives, you are able to, you might have to put in a bit of extra work and maybe not for as much revenue as you would be used to. But I think actually in a post-Corona world, focusing on ways to connect with your client base in a more personal way is going to be more appreciated. And I think that will help you resume business in a relatively normal way after this is all over.
Thanks. And Jean-Paul, the last remark.
Yes, I would like to thank everyone for their attention. It's really honorable to be able to discuss our expertise. We've done it a couple of times now through webinars. It's amazing how much attention there is for this topic and how much time people spend on maintaining and building their relationships. Of course, I hope everyone will be safe and we will come out of this crisis as soon as possible. These are unprecedented times, well, let's see how the future will look like. But thank you for your attendance.
Yes, thank you very much, everybody. And thank you, Bengt Arne, for moderating this for us.
Indeed, thank you very much. This is the end of the session. Again, thank you for joining, and we will log off now. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.